And so that's one rule that's always existed in our household. And along with that screen limit, when it comes to screen time on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we each get a night to choose. Each of us gets to pick,
Mhm.
and you can opt for a game night instead of watching a show. And usually that's me opting for the game night. But I definitely think it makes a big difference because and I'll get pushback from my child on, "I don't wanna play a game, I wanna watch something." And then I remind her of how much we laugh our heads off when we it doesn't matter what board game we play, inevitably we laugh our heads off, and she's like, "Oh, you're right, that is pretty fun." So it's just like this knee-jerk thing, just screens just hook into our brain in this
Yeah.
very powerful way. So anyway, so that's one of our limits. How about you?
Yeah, we don't have the same limits. You know, we do allow screen time during the weekdays. And this is post-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, I had a lot more guardrails on our screen time initially.
On today's Harness the Power of Planning podcast, we are going to talk about parenting. In part one, we talk about tech boundaries and how we establish those within our family for all of the digital devices in our lives. And then in part two, we talk about, do our kids have these skills of compassion and empathy? Are they inborn or do we have to teach them? Spoiler alert, it's both. And we talk about that on this episode 93 of the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, starting now. Hello, hello, hello. Happy Thursday. Allegra here with Beyond Your Wildest Dreams. I am joining you every Thursday, as I do, with a little bit of prioritizing of yourself and your goals, because I know how hard it is when you have anyone who has a claim on your time, whether or not it's a child or a spouse or a family member, maybe a parent or grandparent. Like in my situation, if you've heard about my wonderful 100-year-old grandmother, actually she'll be 101 this year, or if you have a pet, when you have other entities who have a claim on your time, it can be really hard to prioritize yourself and your goals, which is why I talk about the things that I talk about. And if you didn't know, I have this bouquet of books that I've written with Natasha, my co-author, my frequent guest on this podcast. And these books are all designed to be done in about 45 minutes to an hour, and they're all workbooks because Natasha and I know that you learn best when you're actively using the information, not just when it's being spat at you. And if you're watching me live, awesome. You're welcome to chat, put anything in the comments. You can also put it in the comments if you're watching a recording later, because I do read those. And if you want to hear this again later, you could always find it at the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. If you check us out on Spotify, I've started uploading the videos there too, which has been huge. I actually got this idea from Spotify themselves because they said, listeners like yours want video. And I said, well, there is video on YouTube already, but I'm going through the extra step of uploading the video to Spotify. And apparently Spotify was right because a lot of you are watching the video on Spotify. Who knew? So that's another way to check it out. But you can always find these recordings, the video, the audio, wherever you listen to your podcast as the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. This will be episode 93. I'm so close to 100. It's incredible. Ooh, it's been a marathon, let me tell you, but it's very exciting. And I have a new strategy that I have been employing as of late where I pick a card from this box of sayings that sits on my desk, and I never look at it in advance. So you're going to be as surprised as I am at this moment. So let's pull a card. Oh, it's upside down. Okay. All appears to change when we change. All appears to change when we change. Henri Frédéric Amil. Okay, so I'm guessing he's French. I am not familiar with Henri. All appears to change when we change. Absolutely. I definitely agree with this saying. When I was studying anthropology in undergrad, I actually took some linguistics classes, and there's something called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Anyone heard of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis? And what the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis says is that we view the world through the language that we have at our disposal. And so you may have heard something like Eskimos have hundreds of words for snow because every little nuanced difference in the different words means something to them because it's very much a part of their everyday existence. And I've also heard the same thing said about the ancient Hawaiians and the the state of the ocean. You could say the waves, but there's not always waves. It could just be the state of the ocean. How they had so many words for all the different states because each state meant something different to them in terms of, current and temperature and will there be good fishing today or not good fishing. And so this saying by Henri Frédéric, all appears to change when we change. I definitely I'm just going to I think he means a lot of things here, but I'm just going to say, I know that as my knowledge increases and as my language increases, definitely the way the world looks to me it changes in different ways. So for instance, I talk a lot about prioritizing yourself and your goals. And I do that by talking about things like productivity and habit formation and goal setting. And those words might not mean anything to you, which is why I say, look, I help you prioritize yourself and your goals because that's language you can understand. But the more you listen to me and the more you might learn about, maybe you'll get curious and you'll look at some of the many books that I put up with regards to goal setting and habit formation and all those sorts of things. In fact, I'm just going to put this up right now. Here is my list of recommended 2025 books to help change the way you think. And so as you start learning about habit formation and goal setting, oh, and here's my friend Natasha. You know,
Hi.
I'm just going to finish this thought and you can jump in. The saying that I pulled today was all appears to change when we change. And I was saying how, we talk about prioritizing yourself and your goals, but we also know that there's terms like goal setting and habit formation and productivity. And, the more you listen to us, the more you check out the books that we recommend or our own books, you will start to see the world in a different way as you acquire this knowledge because you will no longer, I know before I was a student of productivity, I never thought about my morning in a strategic way. I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to wake up and then whatever I have to do, I'm going to do.
Right. Yeah, yeah. As it comes at you, right?
Exactly. Hi,
Mhm.
Jace. Yes, we do see your comments, so feel free to comment and we will answer any questions you might have. But yeah, as your understanding changes, you change. And so, yeah, I don't know if that's what Henri meant by this quote, but that is my personal experience with that quote. How are you doing, Natasha?
I'm very well. Sorry for being late today.
No
Something about
problem.
that just kind of jogged a thought that I had a while back. Somebody had said to me, nothing changes if nothing changes, and that just kind of means like it makes me think of like even the smallest little change begets change, right? So sometimes it feels like, oh, something is unsurmountable or just like, oh my gosh, that's such a huge change I couldn't possibly. But those little, like we've talked about many times before, little changes lead to bigger changes and nothing changes if nothing changes, and so I think I was talking to because I think I was talking to a friend of mine and I was like, I just can't help it, I always get the when I go to this place I'm like I always get they have like a 3 cookie deal, like I always get 3 cookies. I was like, because it's such a good deal, you know what I mean, like because it's cheaper if you
Mhm.
bought 3.
Right,
And
right.
she's like, you don't have to give up cookies completely. She's like, but just have 1 cookie. And I was like, what? You know what I mean? Like my brain at first was like, but the deal with the 3 cookies, it's like so much. And so and then she was like, well, nothing changes if nothing changes. And I was like, ooh, okay, yeah. I don't know if that completely relates to
No,
it just popped into my head.
I think it does because yeah, things appear different. Like suddenly you're realizing, yeah, that's maybe that good deal is not good for my health. So you change how
Right.
you look at that deal,
It
if
definitely
you will.
reframed it where it's like, just because it's free or it's cheap or whatever, you know what I mean, doesn't mean, how they get you with sales. They're like, buy one, get one free. It's like, well, do you need two of them? You know what I mean? Like, and that's, but it's tempting, it's such a good deal, so it did reframe it. It's like, what do I actually need? What do I actually want? Outside of this enticing offer that's being given to me,
Absolutely. So keep learning, keep changing, keep growing. I know that I am a vastly different person than I was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago,
hmm
and hopefully for the better. So we have two topics today. We're talking about today is a parenting episode, and especially because we have Natasha here, so I love having her opinion on this as well. And so we're talking about in part one, we're going to talk about technology limits,
hmm
why and how to set them for your kiddos. And then we're going to talk about in part two, we're going to talk about teaching your kids skills like empathy. And before we get into it, because I just immediately want to start talking about empathy, let's get into setting technology limits.
hmm Yeah.
So, do you want to start? You're welcome to start.
No, go ahead. I have
Well,
thoughts.
we have a rule in our house, and this isn't just about technology limits for my kiddo. This is about our whole family. We have a rule in our house that is no quote unquote, TV during the week. That's just a hard and fast rule. TV time is only on, Friday night, Saturday night, a little bit Sunday. And that works really well for our family because, the first 10 years my husband and I lived in our house, we had a television that was 11 inches diagonal. It was the television I had in college, right? So it was smaller than a laptop computer screen.
Yeah.
And, it was very poor resolution. And so basically, it was like not having a TV because you
Yeah.
had to sit so close to it to watch it. And it was fine. For 10 years, we didn't have a television and we didn't notice it. And then my husband said, hey, the Super Bowl's coming up. I want to have a Super Bowl party. We had moved into a home and he was like, I want to host something in our home. And I said, on the 11-inch television?
Yeah, people are
And
not going to
he
be super thrilled about that.
Yeah, and he said, "No, we're buying a television."
Uh-huh.
So we bought a television, not something gigantic, but definitely much bigger than 11 inches. And from that day on, our TV viewership just inched its way up
hmm
to where we got to the point where we were watching what the average American watches in television, which is 4 hours a day. And that's not including smartphone use. So like they're just
hmm
television. That's not
Yeah.
that's not social media. That's just uh scripted, or I don't know how you want to
Yeah.
define television.
Yeah. hmm
And we were doing that. And around that time I was pregnant, and I said to my husband, I said, "Hey, okay, so we had about 10 years of no television and we've had about 5 or 6 years of television, and I think we need to switch back because it's just crept into our lives and it's taking up time that I would like to be doing other things, especially now that we're going to have a kid and I know we need to." So we made that decision then, and we gave the television away, and we've kept that because again, we saw the difference. And so that's one rule that's always existed in our household. And along with that screen limit, when it comes to screen time on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we each get a night to choose. Each of us gets to pick,
hmm
and you can opt for a game night instead of watching a show. And usually that's me opting for the game night. But I definitely think it makes a big difference because, and I'll get pushback from my child on, I don't want to play a game. I want to watch something. And then I remind her of how much we laugh our heads off it doesn't matter what board game we play, inevitably we laugh our heads off. And she's like, oh, you're right. That is pretty fun. So it's just like this knee jerk thing, just screens just hook into our brain in
Yeah.
this very powerful way. So anyway, so that's one of our limits. How about you?
Yeah, we don't have the same limits. We do allow screen time during the weekdays, and this is post pandemic. Pre pandemic, um, I had a lot more guardrails on our screen time initially, and then kind of like all bets were off when the when the pandemic hit. Like, mommy
Right.
needed some breaks and whatever else, and sometimes it was used as like a dangling a carrot. So it kind of I loosened up the guardrails that were around screen time. But in general, I mean, we have I think some of the basic stuff that most families have, like, no screens until your homework is finished, or I shouldn't say no screens, because obviously they're working on Chromebooks and whatnot for their
Right.
homeworks. But, no entertainment, screens till after your homework is done or you've practiced your guitar or that kind of thing. So we have those kind of caveats as a family. If there is time, we've gotten into watching an episode of The Office together as a family, which has been so much fun. But like,
Mhm.
and we don't do it every single night. It's just kind of like when there happens to be a time to do it and so forth. So we kind of like end off our night with an episode of The Office, which has been super fun. But the main thing that I think for us technology wise is that we've kept things as far as like the personal device scenario. My kids don't have any personal devices except for an Apple Watch, which, now they're 11 and 14. And I had originally said to, when you hit middle school, you're going to get an Apple Watch because I want to be able to communicate with you. But as you may or may not know, you don't have any access to any other kinds of apps, no social media apps, no
Mhm.
YouTube and stuff on your watch. Excuse me. And then when you hit high school, you get a phone. Well, my older son has his Apple Watch for all through middle school, and when it came time for him to have this the phone, because that was the original agreement, right around this time, this past summer, this very definitive research came out that, like, your kids should not have a smartphone until at least 16, and he is 13 at the time. And so I was kind of like starting to backpedal. And on his own, he just said, Mom, I don't want a smartphone. I see all my friends with just their faces in their phones all the time. And I rather, have fun and interact with my friends than, have my face in a phone all the time. And I was like, good. Because I was about to back off on that move the goalpost to 16, the age of 16.
Mhm.
But I think the main thing here is just that, by them not having access to a smartphone or smart device all the time has really shifted things, for that. Well, I shouldn't say they never really had it, but they've just kind of stayed away from it, and it hasn't really been much of a thing. There hasn't been a real draw to it. It hasn't been like they're not like constantly asking for my phone or anything like that. It's just kind of like not part of their world. So it's
Right.
just kind one of those things. And I'm sure we're all, it's designed for you to be addicted to it. So we're just going to have to find, ways to just make sure that we set parameters around it. Like, their watches charge in my room at night so that they're not texting friends and stuff like that at the end of the night. It charges away from them and
Yes.
that kind of thing. So, and it will continue to have, and of course, no devices at the the dining room table for dinner and meals. And even my husband and I have to remind each other sometimes, because sometimes I'll sit down and I'll just put my phone on the table next to me and I'm like, oh, flip it over or go put it on the kitchen counter or something like that,
Yeah.
because it's ubiquitous. It's like a limb sometimes, you just kind of have it on you all the time. Sometimes I leave the
Yeah.
house without it, and it's a nice break. So we do more of that around the personal technology devices. And then we also have family movie night too. We do Friday night family movie night, and we do the same thing where somebody gets to pick. We have like a little tracker, like whose turn is it to pick on Friday nights for whatever movie we're watching, and it's fun. I like that part.
Yeah, so my child also does not have a smartphone. I gave her a flip phone a couple years ago just because she started doing outings with this organization that she's a member of, and so I wanted her to be able to communicate with me
For
when she did
sure.
those outings. And when she was younger, the flip phone, it was my flip phone that I lent her when she
Yeah.
went places.
Yeah.
Now that she is in high school, she has the flip phone with her, and I have to say the nice thing about parenting in 2024, 2025 is that there are enough families who feel similarly that she's not the only one with a smartphone.
Mhm.
And I mean, without a smartphone. So she's not the only one with a flip phone,
Right.
one.
Right.
And she also there's literally no conversation about a smartphone. She has not asked for it. She does not try to monopolize my phone.
Mhm.
As your kids do, she has a laptop, but it has time limits associated with it because there's
Mhm.
some very definitive research about why it's important to power down from devices at night in order to not
Mhm.
interrupt with sleep.
Yeah.
You know, if you type in the word sleep hygiene, going back to the quote we were talking about at the beginning of the day, here's a term you might never have heard of, sleep hygiene, which is this idea that when you have a routine, it helps you sleep better at night. And screens can be very disruptive for sleep hygiene. So I have set limits on her computer where it automatically shuts off. And on the weekends, it won't turn on until afternoon, like it won't power on, period. But
Mhm.
also, yes, she has to have done her laundry, her room needs to be clean before she can her chores need to be done before she's allowed to spend any time on her device.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those are those other limits.
I
But
feel like I mean, these are hopefully good guardrails, you know. And I found that, you know, this is just anecdotally, like I have friends who are just surprised that my kids can sit and watch an entire movie, you know, because their children have been able to watch a video, these short duration bits of entertainment, that their kids are kind of like, oh, 90 minutes of the same thing, you know? And so,
right, no attention span.
yeah, it's just, you know, and listen, not trying to, you know, um, yuck anyone's yum. Like, you like short entertainment, great, you know, but I think that it's just overall, you know, so far it's really worked for us and our family. And I think it's been a good thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and I would also encourage people who wanna learn more about this to just there's lots of research out there about the effects of screen time on, uh, attention span, on sleep hygiene, and on, self-confidence for kids. There's so much
Mm-hmm.
about it. So, check it out
Yeah.
and make whatever decisions work for you and your family. Okay, part 2 of today's podcast is about teaching children skills like empathy and compassion. And you might be surprised that I use the word skills when describing that. And I do
Mm.
that very purposefully. I do not believe empathy and compassion are, inborn human traits. Maybe they are in some people, but when my kiddo was in preschool, we were actually part of a cooperative preschool, which means that I was there at least one day a week to work. That's what a co op does.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating to be exposed to 21 children rather than just my, one child,
Yeah.
right? Because if you're like most modern Americans, if you don't have kids in your family, you might not be around kids. And that was very much my experience. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really around kids until I had one of my own. And I saw that when a kid would get injured, there was 1 or 2 kids that would immediately run up to that child and be like, "Are you okay? Oh my gosh, teacher, so and so's hurt. Come over here."
Mm-hmm.
There was the kid that was the natural caregiver, and then there were the kids who were like, onto their own thing, and then there were the
Mm-hmm.
kids who were sort of, like, actively uncomfortable at what was going on,
Mm.
either just because it made them uncomfortable or because, like, "Am I gonna get blamed for what happened?"
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And my kid was not in the, "Hey, check out if the kid's okay" group. Let me just say that. And I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm gonna need to do something about this because I want her to be compassionate and empathetic." And I had to purposefully, anytime we were in that situation, say, "Hey, I can see you feel a little uncomfortable. Can we talk about that? But before we talk about that, can we just go check and see if your friend's okay, right? You like that person, you want them to be okay and stop crying as well. Like, let's
Yeah.
go see how they're doing."
Mm-hmm.
And it was I had to do this regularly. It took a long time for it to become something that she learned. But that
Right.
was a big eye-opening moment for me. So that's why I use the word skills,
Yeah,
because not
it
everyone's
for
gonna have
sure.
it.
Right? I mean, absolutely. And I think that there's the whole nature nurture debate and whatnot, but your kids learn from watching you, right? What you model is what they see all the time. And so, I think that one of the gateways, I know for us, we read some books that would encourage emotional intelligence, right? So your EQ instead of your IQ. And there's lots of research that shows that ultimately having a more satisfying or happy life, I just want to say happy is, it's kind of a dicey word. Like, I want them to be happy. Yes, of course. But we want our kids to be resilient. We want our kids to be able to, it's even maybe more important than happy, because that's kind of a high bar to have all the time, but is emotional intelligence. So the more your child is emotionally aware of what's going on with them, or being able to see what's going on with others, excuse me, ultimately winds up having a more satisfying life, typically, from what the research shows. So we have these books that were just, literally it was a book that was like, you know, Joe spilled his milk. And then they just have like a kid's face, like, just like, like, and just, this is early on, right? Pointing to that and being like, how do you think he's feeling right now? That kind of thing. So,
Mhm.
going ahead and doing that, we had a couple of books that really kind of cue you into recognizing people's emotions outside of
Mhm.
yourself. And then the other thing is just also modeling it for yourself, right? So of course your kid skins your knee. Most parents, most moms especially, have a lot of empathy, and you've got, like, you're going to take care of it, and you're going to give them a lot of love and compassion and stuff. But I think the big aha for me was my own self-talk to myself when I would forget something or mess something up, or burn something on the stove or whatever, or left the house without something really important that we were supposed to bring or something like that. I found that I was berating myself
Mm.
verbally, like, oh God,
Mhm.
so stupid, da, 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 and then seeing that kind of like transfer into my especially my youngest, who is really, he's got a lot of emotional intelligence, and he really absorbed that, and the self-talk that was starting to happen with him too. And when you see it outside of yourself and you hear your little one talking to themselves that way, you're like, oh my goodness, this is
Mm.
like, you're not stupid because you forgot your whatever, like, things happen. But and I was like, wow, that is, whether you want to or not, even with all the lip service to empathy or compassion, if you're not showing that to yourself,
Mhm.
your kid's going to pick up on that. And so I feel like that was a major thing for me, was to say, like, wow, I really need to model my own self-talk, my own empathy for myself, my own compassion for myself, and that will eventually spill over to my kids, and then hopefully spill over to their them being in the world empathetically, recognizing when maybe somebody needs help or needs a shoulder to cry on or something like that.
Yes. Yes to modeling, and yes, I love this book that you're talking about that helps kids recognize emotions, because not
Yes.
all parents get to be in the school place with their child to see
Right.
them. So that's a great way. Another book I really liked was How Full Is Your Cup? And did you see
Ooh,
that one? It has,
no.
so it has, like, a parent talking, or it has an adult talking to a kid. I don't remember if it was the parent or the grandparent, and they have little cups over their head, and the adult explains to the child, like, sometimes your cup gets empty because of, something that makes you sad or mad or whatever, and then you can fill your cup up by doing things like this. And I thought that was a nice way to visualize it. And again,
Love
going
that.
back to, having teaching experiences at home in case you're not able to be there in person.
Right.
I Another thing that I thought was really interesting that got me thinking about this idea of teaching these skills of empathy and compassion, and critical thinking, and speaking up for yourself, all these things that, yes, some people have them as
Skills.
natural traits.
Skills. Yeah. You need the opportunity to practice it too in a safe environment.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of these things we might have to teach our kids, because maybe they have one of them naturally, but maybe 3 of them are something that we need to strengthen. I saw this video, and I'm sure if you search for it, you'll be able to find it, and it was of a preschool in, I'm assuming it was an Asian country. That's just what it looked like from the decor of the classroom. And the children were seated in little chairs in rows, And as you watch the video, you understand that they're supposed to be on a bus. And then someone would approach the rows. The one I saw, like, the little kid had, like, a cane and was kind of, like, had something around their shoulders, and they were kind of walking hunched over, so I guess that child was acting like an elderly person, and then the teacher helped the children practice giving up your seat for someone who might need it,
Mhm.
and I thought that was so yeah, like, yes, that's something that needs to be taught because
Right.
I think culturally, there used to be a time when people would automatically give up a seat to
Mhm.
someone who looked like they might need to sit a little bit more than you do, but it's definitely not something that was discussed. You might see a sign, like,
Right.
reserved
Like,
for,
right. Mhm.
but I do think this idea of actively teaching it
Absolutely.
is
Because
very different.
it's not, I'm just gonna say I have boys and they're not like the most observant. They're just in the stage where like they're not the most observant in the world. Like, they're not. So what you're describing happened yesterday at his eye appointment. There were three elderly people that came in and he was so tired. He had been up late the night before at a basketball practice or whatever. So he was waiting for his appointment and he basically fell asleep in his chair. But I watched these three elderly people come in and I just stood up and just, moved to the side so that my seat was available. And then I saw a dad and his daughter noticed them as well. And he and his daughter got up too and then motioned to the chair to let the people know, like, hey, please, take a seat. But that dad modeled it for his daughter to,
Mhm.
and I don't think it's something that, a kid who just got out of school at 3 p.m. and maybe
Exactly.
is a little bit dazed or whatever, or doing their homework and stuff, may not notice, like, yeah, some people coming in and having a little bit trouble walking and so forth, it may not occur to them
Yeah,
initially, and so you really do have to model, you do have to show and teach. And just it was just an observation, right? It wasn't, nobody asked him to get up or any of that. It was just, he observed it, he got up. I did the same. I let my youngest just sleep. He was completely knocked out, like in the waiting room chair. So I was like, he can stay seated, and they wound up having three open chairs because myself and the other dad and daughter got up. But yeah, you have to model it. You have to show, if this is the kind of be the change you want to see, right? If it's the kind of compassionate community we want to live in, we got to be that compassionate community, and we got to show our kids how to be that compassionate.
yeah, and so maybe it'll just be in the moment, like with Natasha at the doctor's office, or maybe you specifically notice, my kiddo is really strong in these ways, but here are some personality traits or skills that I would like them to acquire, and you can look for books or situations. My the church that I belong to, we do an outreach once a month with people experiencing homelessness, and we've taken our kiddo along because, I once heard this quote by Michael J. Fox, and he said, I'm probably gonna misquote him. He said something like, "My one, disappointment as a parent is that I will never be able to make my kids as scrappy as I am." And I loved he did use the word scrappy, "as
Hmm.
scrappy as I am, because I had a really hard life, and so I had to be scrappy." And he's like, I'm something along the lines of, "I'm glad that I can give my kids this great life, but
Sure.
I wish I could give them this personality trait of scrappy."
Yeah.
And so, same sort of thing, like my child does not have to worry about where her next meal comes from, but I want her to be aware of the fact that that's not the case for everybody, and
Hmm.
that, uh,
Yeah.
seeing that for herself and being of service in that way is, just a very visceral experience versus
Yeah.
me just telling her that this exists.
Right. I
So,
think there's opportunities to bring that up all the time. You don't have to be in the specific situation that I was in yesterday to, to go ahead and say, point something out. I feel like the level of awareness is like, the first foundational part of this, like just being aware of,
yes.
there's somebody who maybe needs help or somebody who could use, hold the door open for them or something, you know what I mean? Like you can just to point it out, and then ask them, well, why do you think, we should stand up? Or why do you think, you know, um,
Absolutely.
there was a time where my kids were really, they were taking their have give money and they were all about like creating little care packages for people experiencing homelessness that we would see on the street or at freeway exits and so forth, and we would, talk about it, talk about why you think they would need that help, or why it's a good idea to, or what maybe they're going through, or that kind of thing. So it can be as simple as a question or a discussion, or just showing, creating awareness first and foremost before there's even empathetic action.
Absolutely. Well, our time is up here. Thank you for joining us today. And hey, if you are interested in learning more about how planning can help you prioritize yourself in your life, we do have this on-demand workshop that you can check out at this QR code here, or also I'm going to pull up the tiny URL for those of you listening to the podcast. It is tinyurl.com/HPOP on demand. So HPOP, harness the power of planning on demand, because it's on demand. So tinyurl.com/HPOP on demand. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Natasha, for joining us this week.
My pleasure. It's always fun chatting with you, Allegra.
And remember, planning makes everything easier. See you next week.
Bye.
If you want to take your planning skills to the next level, consider taking the Harness the Power of Planning workshop. It's available on demand at tinyurl.com/HPOP on demand, all one word. That's tinyurl.com/HPOP on demand. We'll show you how to plan your day, your week, your month, your year, your life, and help you to start prioritizing yourself and your goals right now. Dream wild, wild dreamers. Thanks for joining us for the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen.